after Mark's presentation. It's like, oh my gosh, like where do I'm so behind the times. So, and given that Mark was honest and said he was intimidated by Morgan, I think that's what he said, right? Which is pretty smart. So Morgan, what did you think of what Mark had to say? Like what caught your eye?
All of it. I thought it was, I thank you for that presentation. I thought it was fantastic. Microphone. Oh, yes. Back with microphone. No, I would say thank you. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it's the same thing on our end as well. I know you mentioned a couple of companies, a lot of companies that you think are really innovating and disrupting real estate, and I've been actually keeping my eye on. I'm actually working on a couple magazine stories about a few of those companies, so that caught my attention. Also, this idea of social media and brand awareness, because that's actually I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation that Forbes we've got this concept of like 95-year-old startup, but that's like a huge part of what we're doing as an established company as well to try and keep up with all the changes we see in the industry. So it was great to hear you. And I just have to say I wrote that hipster neighborhood story, so thank you for the shout out.
I grew up like 2 blocks from Forbes office. You're still there.
Yeah.
I was in East 12. Am I on? Oh.
So, Mark, here I have a question for you. In today's world, are and you just talked about, you work for big real estate companies. Are they relevant?
I think the agents.
Not the agents.
Yeah, they're relevant. Only the ones who are relevant, to them, for the most part, are relevant because they have great agents working there. But what I'm starting to see are some brokerages who are trying to be relevant as a brokerage on their own, like as a brokerage doing things that are turning on the community above and beyond the agents. What I'm noticing in some cases, the agents don't like that because they like the fact that they were, the star of the show, and the brokerage was just supposed to be there in the background to support them. But in some cases, and maybe there's small brokerages like the Good Life Team, if you discovered them in Austin, Texas. All right, so I'll tell you about those guys. They're small, only 30 people, but they've built such an incredible little brand that does things as a group that the brokerage gets phone calls from people who just want to work for the brokerage.
What was the name again?
They're called the Good Life Team in Austin, Texas. Christina Wise is the CEO. So like here's an example. I was at the leading RE conference, leading real estate companies in the world. These are 700, big deal brokerages around the country. And I was supposed to have a meeting with 2 or 3 brokers, and I found that they all decided to ditch me and go play golf, which is fine. But while they were ditching me and going to play golf, at the very same time, this small little company's CEO was on the phone with the Zappos stakeholder doing an interview that she was recording and then distributing on the web to everybody in her community and everybody in her company. Like, that to me mattered, right? Like, she was taking this seriously. So, yeah, I mentioned Houlihan Lawrence. That's a brand that has big market share. They've grown, I think I can say this. In 2008, they had 23% market share. Today, they have almost 48% market share. They've doubled in volume, $2 to $4 billion in sales. The brokerage matters.
Wow.
So, yeah. In some cases, yes. In some cases, the brokerage doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, really interesting. Paul.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
does everybody know what Paul does? So Paul is the founder or co-founder or part of the original, I think founder, right, of an email marketing company called Resora, right? And those of you who have worked with us, almost all of you, know that Resora is kind of a staple in our repertoire, if you will, when we go into a market in terms of helping us really build awareness, right? And ultimately, a key for us is making sure we've got awareness at the broker level, because one of the things we know is we create all this buzz, we get a great property on the property porn section of Forbes, you drive all this noise, and what we find is those consumers don't always call us, right? They call, and it's almost like they call their friend who's an agent, or however, it's very random, and we know that it's really important that we've built awareness at the broker level, and Resora is really a staple in doing that. So email marketing company, what are your thoughts in terms of, where Mark was going is email marketing as effective as it was 2 or 3 years ago, and where are you, where do you see that evolving?
Sure. Just to clarify, also, I'm co-founder along with Mike Russo on the concierge team, and Molly, who's here. She the user interface design came from her and her team as well. So email marketing is absolutely as relevant, if not more so, than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Certainly, spam increases. We work very diligently to make sure that spam, that the marketing materials that are getting put into our system aren't making it into the spam box, but we can't guarantee it, and it's not going to happen. I think, like anything, it's quality over quantity. There are some emails that I get on a daily basis that I want to get on a daily basis. Groupon, not that I want them on a daily basis, but some of you want Groupon on a daily basis, Inman on a daily basis. There are other things that I really only want on a monthly basis. There are things, the stuff that comes from concierge, I'm on their list, I get it. It's very relevant when it comes out. So I say it's very much has to do with the relevance and the information that's being sent out. We constantly get asked, how often should I be sending? Is it a monthly? Is it a weekly? Is it an every other day? Well, that doesn't matter. It's the quality of what you're putting together. I think that email marketing is growing in popularity, but I think that it goes along with everything else that Mark was talking about too, with social and with print, everything else. It's a 360 effort that's out there. And at the end of the day, like Karen was talking about earlier today, nothing beats getting feet on the ground and shaking hands, but all these little pieces and parts and getting out, and whether it's putting your information on Street Advisor, or putting out an email, or putting stuff on Twitter or Yelp or wherever, those are little pieces and parts that all feed into your 360-degree marketing effort. You have to be aware of all those pieces and parts, and together they all construct the marketing presence that you should have.
Interesting. Morgan, do you, on your column or newsletter, do you have a newsletter that you push out, or is it all about driving traffic to the website?
For me, it's with my column, it's all about driving traffic to the website, and so we do that. We have I have people that follow me and get alerts when a post or a story goes out, and as I said, it goes out. We have syndication partners, Yahoo, MSNBC, Comcast, and these other big ones. But the other thing is for us at Forbes, and this has been especially true with real estate, it's really social media and some of like the visual elements, pictures, putting stuff out through tweets, through LinkedIn. There's a huge real estate community on LinkedIn. It's especially true for anything that's personal finance or market driven. Facebook, we push a lot of stuff out through there, and in general, Forbes pushes a lot of stuff out through there. We've seen our traffic coming from social media. It's done a double-digit increase this year. It's been huge, and I do think that is the future of media. I do think that's the future of how information is getting shared and passed around. We're seeing that at Forbes, and like I said, pictures have in real estate goes a very long way. Tweeting a link to a picture will actually a lot of times get more traction for me than even like a link to the story or like trying to like put a little blurb out to the story. And I also find that for every story of mine that I push out, it's this is part of social media etiquette. We push out other things too, other information people want, maybe a little human thing. It's funny. Yesterday I put something up on my Facebook, and I have subscribers, and it puts me up on my Facebook because I went to In-N-Out Burger when I got here. And I had 3 cheeseburgers, and I was very excited because we don't have that on the East Coast. And I put that up, and that got more comments and more likes from really, I have a lot of real estate people that follow me. That got more attention than some of the stories I put out there, but it also pushed up my subscriber level. So when I send out another story, when I send out another relevant piece of information, I'm not going to click on that because of the picture of In-N-Out Burger. That's how that works.
Interesting. Mark, what are your thoughts about agent websites? I mean, is that passe, and can they compete with who else is out there?
Generally, I kind of think, yeah, it might be passe. building a presence online and the way the web is today, like if your site isn't publishing fresh new content, you know, a static agent website with sort of a poorly designed IDX feed, what good is it? Like, it's not really benefiting you. Like if I want to know about you, I go to LinkedIn to read about your career. If I want to know about you socially, I go to your Facebook page. If I want to see IDX and want to see listings, I just go to Zillow or Redfin. Truly, there is no good IDX, third-party IDX provider in America. They all look like crap. The user interface is bad. They're poorly designed. I don't care who you're using, from Diverse Solutions to WolfNet. They all aren't very good. And so at the end of the day, and these sites don't really come up like Google. So all you've created is sort of a place online that's your place. But there's just so many better places to create more substance around yourself. That I think that if you're sort of acclimated toward being somewhat social, I mean, Morgan just posted a thing I ate in an outburger. People liked it. Like, as silly as that sounds, that's sort of how we interact with each other. So I can interact with that. I can't interact with your website. I just go look at it. And if it's got like boilerplate content, how to buy a house, how to hire a realtor, you know, it's those kinds of sites just provide no value. So
Yeah, I'd actually add, we're not going to add, but bring out what you were talking about earlier with sites like, I would like to see agent sites go away and be replaced with things like About Me, or Visify, which are just really personal websites that are kind of an aggregation of all your online
Yeah,
presence
totally.
or whatever. It's a simple place to go, learn about Mark, the person, or whatever, and then jump off from there, you know, LinkedIn or wherever.
I think, you know, Chad, we worked with an agent for a little while. We moved to Portland thinking that, because I grew up in Manhattan, but my wife did. She grew up outside Manhattan. So I wasn't sure how this life would fit her. So as a fallback plan, I hired a real estate agent to just keep a lookout for a home. He doesn't have a website. All he has is, he has an MLS. I log in to sort of an MLS database. And what he does is he created, you know, a search criteria of what I'd be interested in. And when I would go in there, I'd get an alert letting me know some new properties would pop in. And all I was really searching were things that met my criteria. So like, what do I need his website for? And to see him posing on the front page of his website with his dog, there would be no value in that for me. The real value was just the feed. And it was the MLS feed. So it wasn't beautiful, but at least it served, you know, an intellectual purpose. So between that and what he's saying is like, I think that, you know, some social sites is completely all you need. Does
Zillow.
anybody disagree with that? I'd be curious.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I think you could probably pull that off with what Peter was talking about. Like a different type. I think you can absolutely pull that off, that type of presence with what Peter was talking about. That new type of site that's, you want to explain that again maybe? Paul, I'm sorry, Peter.
Peter Paul.
I'm sorry. if you have that type of site where you could actually plug in an IDX feed to it, it becomes, see the problem, if I can just
Keep going.
the problem with all these template agent websites is that they're built on these fixed platforms that aren't nimble enough to work with sort of outside, APIs that allow you to build things in. So like if an agent's insisting on having some type of presence like that, either do what Paul said or go to WordPress and just build something simple on WordPress that, again, allows you to publish. WordPress's APIs are everything. So like your Instagram feed can pull in there, your Pinterest stuff can pull in there. Like it's curating all your good stuff into one place. But then if you want to capture people, somebody mentioned a video that I made a few years ago in the back called I'm Not Elite. So I'm really sensitive to the idea of capturing people, forcing them to call you. Like if you're servicing somebody properly on any website destination, if they want to call you, they will call you. So if you want to get them inside your area and sort of keep them there in that spirit in which you mean by capture, you need a site that is interesting and is fresh. And I think like bringing in all that curated stuff in that type of an environment is really the best way.
Just to add what I was saying.
Thanks.
I think if you're talking about just simply the branding being content about your area, Aspen or wherever, for example, many of those, even something as simple as Twitter, you can add, there's branding you can add to those sorts of things. There are easy ways that you can create visualizations or you can set some content to add just that little piece of art that we want to say.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Zillow in terms of where do you think that's headed, and I know what their stated mission in life is, but how do you see that evolving? Any of it?
Where do you want to
All of you guys. Actually, I'm sure an informed opinion. Morgan, you want to start?
Sure. I think Zillow is a great example of sort of the walls that are coming down between the actual hard information, the branding and advertising, and the editorial. And I think Zillow's been doing a really great job since they IPO'd. I know they have been expanding exponentially on their editorial side. They're actually a contributor for us. Their stuff syndicates through us, and there are times where we use them for their data. But on the same token, when it comes to traffic on stories, they are also one of our competitors. So it's been interesting to see that sort of grow and evolve and change. But I think that's the idea. It's sort of like information and all these different media platforms are coming together, and the boundaries are blurring. And it really, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is coming down to the quality of information. It almost doesn't matter where it's coming from, so long as it's like a good quality, so long as there's quality of information. So it's fascinating to watch that unfold for us as, sort of an old school media institution.
Sure. Paul, your thoughts?
You know what? I spend too much time focused on my company at the moment, not on Zillow's. To really have an educated opinion, to be honest with you. The other thing I would say is I do like, from my perspective, I come from a technology background, not real estate. So my answer is a little bit different here. But I do like the idea of real estate and the information around it being brought out on a national level and not being held inside little silos within boards or markets or whatever.
Mark?
So I have an opinion. So you have, you got Spencer on the news all the time. You have Stan Humphries, the economist, quoted in the newspaper. You have their director of PR on RPR answering questions about real estate all over the country. They're now supplying tools to real estate agents, websites, all kinds of tools. They're supplying marketing opportunities for real estate agents to be found by consumers. It's quite possible that one day, like in January 2nd, 2015, we're going to wake up to the news that Zillow has just lit up every single country, every single state with a broker, and has now become a brokerage. And I'd be hard pressed to be a real estate legitimately put an end to every single brokerage. Because they're providing agents something that very few brokerages can, which is leads, business, opportunity, platforms, tools, and technologies. And I mean, look at what they're buying. They keep buying, they're buying all these companies. Yeah, I know from a business standpoint, they have to satisfy their stockholders because the Zillow stock is not really worth what it's worth. The company's not truly worth what it's valued at. So there's that agenda. But I don't know that there's anything sinister there. I know Spencer really well, and I know Greg really well. They're super nice guys, but they're super smart. They're from Harvard, and I'm from Princeton, so I have a little bit of suspect. And so there's that rivalry. But why wouldn't they do that? Why couldn't they? Can you imagine? I believe that Zillow has, they have a favorable consumer brand. People like Zillow. The average consumer likes Zillow. Why wouldn't they like Zillow? It's a fun name. It's giving them stuff that they could never get before. Can you imagine if a Zillow brick and mortar opened up on your corner? It was decked out, full technology, like no other brokerage can. Like, I operate on the premise that that could happen. And if it never happens, I'm going to be so much better for it because I've prepared myself to combat that. So it may never happen. Good.
So building on that, what is the MLS or local or state, however you want to look at it, it's completely a relic of the past that has no value?
Well, if Zillow, in the context of Zillow has a managing broker everywhere. They still need the MLS to do what the MLS does with data. I mean, the problem with the MLS is that it's a good old boy network filled with not terribly bright people in most cases. And they're like, I take Houston outside of that, they're brilliant there. MRIS and MRED, there's some really great MLSs, but for the most part, it's like 900 MLSs. They're mostly just people that, got tired of being real estate agents, and they may not have even been very good at it. Now they have these tenured jobs, and they don't care. But they do one thing, which is stabilize the data. And I think the consumer needs to have trustworthy, stabilized data. So if the MLSs actually realized they had something which was incredible data, and if they could work with technologists to actually do cool stuff with their data, they could be far more relevant than they are. I think the ones in peril are the brokers. So I kind of, and maybe associations, I don't know what they do, but like I think an MLS still has, like when I look at HAR, anybody here from Texas? From Houston? Why? But HAR.com, the Houston Association of Realtors, could be a Zillow of Zillow. They are brilliant. They're a model for how an MLS can be. They create stuff, they build technology, they supply they are the #1 site in Google when you search for real estate in Houston. Zillow can't usurp that. They rock, and they provide leads galore to there, but it's the only MLS that does that. But if they're the model, I think there's a great future for them. And the agent, and the national brokerage, possibly.
Awesome. What are we doing time, Laura?
So stabilization, accuracy.
Accuracy, when I say stabilization, I mean like the feeds, like the problem when you're a technologist, you probably speak to this, right? Like there's 900 MLS, this is 900 MLS feeds that are all very different.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, up to 900 MLS, there's roughly 300 of them. We cover like 98% of the market, so let's keep focus on those 300. For a company like us, our entire application is built around access to the MLS, to make it easy to create marketing pieces, drag traffic from the MLS. We have to go in and contract with the MLS each time, sign a contract with the brokerage and the MLS, and they're a pain in the ass, frankly, they all suck. And they are archaic. The feeds are all different. Some of them are flat files, we still get
actually, I'm going to piggyback on that with on the editorial side as well, because as I said, covering real estate for media is very image driven, and there's a lot of issues around images and image sharing and where you're pulling that from the web. And this is part of the reason why this happens with me. This happens with a lot of my other colleagues at other media companies. A lot of times when we do write stories or share stories or pull images, we will pull from a place like Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com because we have access to those images and we have access to that information. Whereas trying to if you spot a listing on an MLS, it can be a real nightmare trying to get access to some of those images. And without access to those images, you're not going to profile that property, and nobody's going to know about it outside of that MLS.
Interesting. Question here? Cindy?
I had a question and a comment. My experience as an agent dealing with Zillow, I have found them to be very inaccurate, and I've had to overcome so many buyers or sellers that have an idea from Zillow about the value of their property that's completely incorrect. So the consumer fascination with the site is just amazing to me. I'm wondering, how does that
Two comments on that.
continue?
One is, I think that's the greatest thing that could ever happen to you, is that a consumer comes to you and says, this information is inaccurate, because you're the expert. But the flip side of that is let's face it, even real estate's CMAs are inaccurate. If you just look at what homes are listed for and what they sell for, no one knows what homes are worth, really, until there's...
So you do an auction?
Right, yeah. But even that, you're creating the actual value of a home. So Zillow's never said that we're accurate. In fact, they made up a word for their made-up valuation. But I think that what the consumer kind of digs about it is they know it's made. Some of them get upset because they have a personal stake in that. But and I dealt with it when I listed my house. Somebody offered me what Zillow said my home was worth, and I was flipped out about that. And the funny thing was, when I ended up selling, I only got $5,000 more than Zillow's estimate, which was $300,000 less than my agent told me. So at the end of the day, there's a balance. But I think since Zillow has that, they've never called themselves expert on that. They sort of can get away with that inaccuracy. There's a little bit of transparency there that the consumer, for the most part, forgives.
Just to piggyback off of that for a second, that's the other thing. And now, obviously, I do a lot of data digging and playing with numbers, and it all comes down. Forbes in general does a lot of lists. So one of the things that I know, and maybe this is also because I have an anthropology degree, so I like methodologies, but a lot of it also comes down to your methodology and what you're doing with the data. And I'm not sure if it's still this wide, but going back to the Zillow concept, one of the things they do or they've done in the past is they are looking at home values. And I'm pretty sure this is still the case, but I would have to double check. But they've been looking at home values. So they're looking at tax assessments for the entire neighborhood. They're looking at every property, whether it's listed for sale or not. And that's part of the reason why those values come up the way they do. And then you go to another company, you go to Trulia's website, and whatever their estimates, whatever they might be putting out on their website is different because they're looking only at comparables that are listed for sale or recently sold. So that's part of the reason I think Zillow, and maybe it's smaller because this was at the beginning of the year, but I think their margin of error was 7%, which can be quite large, especially when you're dealing with a luxury market. But that's part of the reason you see that difference is because they're looking at, I believe they're looking at home values rather than just list prices. So that's another interesting thing as far as a lot of these data aggregators. At the end of the day, a lot of it also all comes down to the methodology and how they're taking those raw numbers and crunching them.
Awesome.
I have an idea.
Yep.
For anybody that has to contend with that, just thought of this like an ad that you can create. Just to educate the marketplace as to your value. So the next time you sell a house, the conventional way, I would just do something like this. I'd have a little ad that has a picture of the house, right like that, right on top of the postcard or whatever, or however you want to put this out there by email. And I'd have it sold with the price tag that it's sold as. Put Zillow's estimate right underneath it, and put real estate CMA next to it. And watch what happens. You'll see, for the most part, I was in an extreme situation where my house was, but for the most part, the agent's number was a lot closer to Zillow. Just show it, without any kind of angst or just proof. There's the house, it sold for $800,000, sold for $787. Zillow estimated it's $650. You doing that, you'll somehow educate. That's just a nice way to, I think, educate the consumer as to where your value is. And I want to piggyback off that and say that while Zillow has done this fake estimate thing, I haven't seen one single brokerage come out with anything better. So while brokers like to sit and complain about Zillow this, Zillow that, like, I put them to the challenge. Get the data and create your own. Like, why hasn't Realty? They got, I'm not saying a small broker, but like, you know, even the big guys, Keller Williams, Remax, Century 21, Realty, like, you've seen nobody comment. So I find that.
They've conceded the space.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to take a break. There's a lot of females here that are excited about the Phil Brands guy. I'm kidding, Phil. Sorry.
So any other questions and answers for these guys? They'll be around with us this evening. So.
Hey, what's Bill got that we don't?